Recording in progress. Hello, Scott.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good, Tara. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're finally talking.
I know it's really cool. We talk so much on Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. It's really cool to be able to do this in person. Well, as much
And
in person as we can be.
right. And I'm sorry that I had to cancel before, so we got delayed quite a bit.
All good. You
Yeah,
know,
I needed a
things
break.
happen. So how are you doing so far, like through the whole crazy pandemic?
I'm okay. I don't know. I mean, we've managed to stay healthy, so that's awesome. We've been super precautious about everything and, got our vaccines and we still hand sanitize incessantly and we don't really
Yep.
do a whole lot of running around, but we never did really anyway. So that's kind of neither here nor there. But yeah, we're hanging in there. My son went back to school this week.
Wow.
Uh, he did all of fourth grade at home and the end of third grade at home. So this is his first week back into in-person school. So that's been fun.
Right.
Um, but yeah, but what about you? How's it him?
Um,
How's it affected you?
yeah, well, basically, I work at Sony Music. That's what my day gig is. So
Oh,
like I do that. I live in Woodstock, New York area. Um, Met my wife many moons ago in New York City. We both were in New York City at the time, and we had children in the New York City area. Decided to move back upstate because she's originally from here. Wanted to have children up here, not really in the New York City area. And we did that. We moved up here, and so we have two children. I have a daughter that's 12, Nico. I have a son, 17, Shane. And when the pandemic hit, they were like, take your laptop and just work at home.
yeah.
So that's what I did. And that was in March of 2020. And I've been up here ever since, not having to go any farther than a one room away and been online doing everything, which has been really amazing and great because the travel was out of control.
Yeah.
Going to the New York City area, I'm like 90 miles away from New York City. So like I would have to basically go back and forth. So it was kind of crazy. So once COVID hit and being up here, our family got even more close together,
Yeah.
as a unit, which was really nice. But in November, my son got COVID. And yeah, so he thinks he got it from school. Um, he was in a hybrid, so they did a hybrid thing. So for the kids, they basically were like, okay, you know, everyone's going home, everyone's doing everything online, which was like similar with what happened with you.
Yeah.
They're doing everything online. They're fine with it. It worked out for them. They were doing really well with it. Obviously, it's hard with no friends, and
Yeah.
we were doing everything masking up and following the protocol and all that other stuff. And then when my son got it, unfortunately in November, it took almost 7 days to get the tests back. So
Oh my
when they
God.
got, yeah, because New York State was so over flooded with
Right.
everything. So 7 days, he had chills and a little bit like that. He kind of felt, we definitely knew that something was up. He lost his sense of taste and smell and all that. And once that happened, we had him tested. 7 days later, they're like, okay, you're positive. Freaked us out. We're like, oh my God, this is
Right.
crazy. Is he going to be okay? And of course, he was fine. But we got tested the next day and found out my daughter was asymptomatic, but it was a rapid test. So you don't know whether or not the rapid test is 100% or not.
Right.
But we quarantined, and luckily, we have enough space to where they were upstairs, we were downstairs. Me and my wife didn't get it, which was amazing.
Awesome. Yeah.
And we were right next to, my son the whole time. We hug him, we're hanging out with him, watching movies and doing the whole thing. And it didn't affect us, luckily, but we quarantined, did the whole quarantine thing. And now, the Delta is happening and this is some new crazy stuff. And I was just in New York City yesterday, visiting my old friend. Yeah, we're old, she's old, we're old. We have known her since, I was 20 and I'm 53 now. So we've known each other a long time. And so it was a birthday week. So we went to go see Guns N' Roses at Giant Stadium. Uh, Originally saw them in '87 and the whole climb when they played the clubs, and
Yeah.
no one really knew who they were yet, and then they blew up. But it was fun to see her. But traveling to New York City is challenging because I mean we're still doing the whole thing with the masks and everything and watching the variant, and some people are in the subway with no masks, which is kind of ridiculous. They're not following the protocol. I saw people riding the subway totally had no mask on at all. Walking in the streets another thing, but like taking public transportation and being
Right, because
indoors,
you're enclosed.
yeah, you have to follow it. So there's a whole everything that's going on with the news and the conspiracy theory people, and it's just like the vaccinations are not high enough yet in the United States. We're going through a lot of craziness. You see a lot of the different um, what's it called, different states going through some craziness because
Right.
of the variant, and because of the lack of will to get vaccinated and stuff. And it's crazy, but yeah, but we're getting through it. Yeah,
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
okay.
So when your son was sick, did he just kind of have moderate symptoms? He didn't
Yeah.
get like really, really sick.
No,
That,
he had no fever, lost its sense of taste and smell, a little bit of chills, and that was it. But we're all completely vaccinated. My daughter's 12. She got vaccinated the minute that it got approved.
fantastic.
Up in the Woodstock area, there's a local apothecary that has been great, and they've been vaccinating people. And me and my wife volunteered for the apothecary to be able to get our vaccines earlier, because it took some time for people that are under 60 to get it.
Right.
So we did it, and feel good about it. But we have to just take the right protocol and see what's going to happen going forward. We have no indication for schools at all right now in what's going to happen with going back. There's no CDC or state recommendation or anything at all. So like the schools are just preparing, like, look, no more online schooling. You're going to have to go. And then I'll have to adjust and see whether or not they do masks or not. I'll have to see,
Yeah, so at Dirk's school, they did still have online as an option for people, but he had been home for so long that we felt like it would be in his best interest to go back, at least unless things get crazy again, and then we'll bring him back home. But he's very good about wearing his mask. He doesn't. It doesn't bother him at all. So he couldn't care about wearing a mask, and he's really like he knows about not touching his face, and he does his hands with sanitizer all the time and stuff. So I'm not worried about him. But his school doesn't require masks right now. And he said only him and one other kid in his class are wearing masks. I mean, there's other kids in the school doing it, but in his specific class, it's only him and one other kid. And we're just like, just keep doing your thing, man. None of us, I don't understand this aversion to masks because, maybe because I'm sort of an introvert anyways. So it's almost, for me, it's kind of like wearing sunglasses where it's like an extra layer of protection between me and other people, germ-wise, but also like boundary-wise.
Totally.
So I don't actually mind it. And plus it's like, okay, I don't have to worry about putting any kind of makeup on. Like, I don't know. It doesn't bother me at all. I mean, it kind of sucks here because when it's 110 degrees outside, it's a little hot, but who cares? I don't know. It doesn't bother me.
Right.
I don't understand why people are so up in arms about it. It's so ridiculous to me.
I know, I agree.
I've got people who have told me like it doesn't do anything anyways, and it's like, well, did you teach your children to cover their face when they sneeze? If so, why? Because if you think a mask doesn't work to spread germs or snot or whatever, why did you teach them to cover their face? Because it's the same exact thing in principle, right?
Right.
It's just completely illogical. I don't understand it.
I know there's a lot of craziness too with, I remember kind of going, I was like pretty much in the city area up until I was 39, 40, and did a lot of stuff in the city, a lot of going to concerts and a lot of playing music and stuff. And I just always remember, even as a little kid, like even in the 70s or early 80s, like Asian people wearing masks in wintertime, because and so, you know, it's like, is the aversion of not wanting to do that because of where the virus originated from, or is it that you're just don't want to do something? Oh, don't tell me what to do, sort of thing.
Like a contrary thing.
Yeah, it's weird. Look, I mean, like, you know, kids can't go to school without the MMR shots.
Exactly.
So why don't you want to get your kids vaccinated, or why don't you want to be vaccinated? I mean, look, if you watch the news, it's funny, like, you know, we watch the CNN stuff or whatever, and, you know, people like, oh, don't watch that or whatever. And, you know, getting addicted to news can be toxic, and you don't want to, like, I didn't have it on in the house. We didn't have it on in the house around the kids when they were younger, you know, but now my daughter's 12, now my son's 17, you know, they know what's going on, and stuff. And, you know, a lot of film that you see about people being in the hospitals and the variant and stuff like that, you see that, like, a lot of people are like unhealthy anyway, or immune compromised, and they may take the vaccine, and maybe it'll, you know, it's going to do something. It's going to help. It's going to help guard you. That's the thing. You don't want to end up dying from this, but, you know, at the same time, right now, it's like, if, you know, the US doesn't get vaccinated up to a certain percentage, then there's going to be a real, and starting now to be a real problem. You look at the map of the US, and it's like, you know, all the states that are in here, like, are all red, and, like, you know, it's all getting messed up. The numbers are going up or whatever. And I mean, for me, like, I have actually a friend who, me and my wife's friend, who's a cancer doctor, and she actually showed us video from inside the ICU around April and May in Brooklyn. And it was like people were laying on the floors. There's no beds. It's like, it's so sad and horrible. But there wasn't a vaccine then, but there is one now. So it's like, well, you know, take it. I mean,
yeah, and I've seen like memes and stuff about, you know, there's countries that would just, people in countries that can't get the vaccine yet would do anything for it.
I know.
And people here just flagrantly disregarding it. And it's like, it's such a spoiled attitude.
It is.
And I mean, data doesn't lie. Numbers don't lie. You can have theories and suspicions about, is it healthy? And it's understandable to be cautious. You should be cautious when you're putting something in your body. But
Absolutely.
like, data doesn't lie. Numbers aren't emotional. They're just numbers. So when there's definitive numbers, but then again, people say that's a lie too, because everyone is so conspiracy theory minded, and like everybody's out to get me, and they're all lying, and it's like, no, what would they have to gain by it? Like, there's no logic to it.
No.
It's so aggravating. And like, to your points about the MMR vaccine, I mean, like, for my child to go to school, we had to bring his vaccination records.
Right.
And it's not a big deal. You just do it. It's not a big deal. And I remember in Ohio when they passed the seatbelt law, people threw a fit about their fucking rights to not wear a seatbelt. Well, everybody wears a seatbelt now and they don't even think about it. It's like, okay, yeah, you do have the right to be stupid and not wear a seatbelt and fly through your windshield if that's your choice.
True.
So if you don't want to take the vaccine and potentially die from COVID, or infect somebody else that dies from it, that's your choice. But it's a stupid choice, straight up.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I know it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, like, the whole thing about like, it's this or it's that, and that you're getting chipped and all this other stuff. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's just another health issue that, you know, the world has now. And I mean, I feel like that, like, children are this new generation of, they have a little bit of a different immune system than we do. I mean, we're older as well, but like these kids are kind of built for this stuff. And it's like, and yeah, and I think that, getting a vaccine is good for them too. Why not? But, you notice that like the numbers as far as children's concerned, I know it's going up now. It's changing because the Delta variant is like much more contagious and everything. But still, we need to build our immune systems stronger to survive this stuff. That's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
So I rely on trusting people who are.
Right. Totally.
And I have so many friends who are like, well, I've done my research. It's like, no, you read some articles that somebody else did the research. Like,
right.
It's not the same. And so I don't know. It's just maddening to me. I don't understand the aversion to common sense, but here we are. Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of people up by me, that are, in the Woodstock area. There are a lot of hippies that live up here, or people that are hippie minded that are like, oh, anti-vaxxers completely, like no MMR, no chicken pox, nothing, But like, if you want your kids to go to school, unless you want to homeschool them, you're going to have to go and follow the rules.
Yeah, I know. And it's like, chances are high that their parents probably got them vaccinated, because back in the day, people did what doctors recommended them to do.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's just such a strange thing to me. I don't get it. But
yeah, I know. I think also too, like, not for everyone, but maybe some people haven't had anyone close to them get this.
Yeah.
Maybe
it wasn't a big deal. Like, they didn't get it severely, so it's like, oh, big deal. It's just like the flu, whatever,
Right.
So they didn't see the impact of the people gasping for breath and having to say goodbye to their loved one through a glass wall because they can't get in to see them.
It's horrible. Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is that it's going to keep mutating to where it's going to just become very, very strong if, and that's the thing is that now we have this variant and, we'll have to get a booster and all this other stuff. But like, if we don't get up to that, 70 plus or 80 plus or whatever it's going to be, it's going to keep mutating. And then, that's going to be worse. And it's like, it's just a catch-22. You're going to be going around and around in a circle dealing with, some other variant of this.
So you mentioned your job had you working from home. Have you had to go back, or are they going to allow you to continue at home?
Yeah, it's interesting because, a lot of major companies are doing this whole thing where they were like, oh yeah, maybe like after Labor Day, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen now. I think Amazon is not allowing anyone back until after 2022. I've had no indication of anything. They talked maybe September, like I said, same sort of window. But some people that I talked to, they were like, I don't know if we'll ever go back. And then maybe it'll be a cohort, where it's like a couple days a week or whatever. I'm good working online forever. I have no problem with that at all.
I've been doing it. I've worked permanently from home for almost 10 years now. So
right.
Nothing has changed for me as far as work goes, except for that my coworkers are all at home now too. But I've always loved it. And then some people are really resistant to it. Like, some people think they can't do it because they like that interaction or whatever. And then they've had to do it and now they love it. And they're like, oh my God, I don't want to go back. I'm like, I told you. Fantastic.
Oh, of course. No, totally. I mean, for me, what I do for my day job, I don't need to be in front of anybody. I mean, it's all paper, it's all digital. So it's different. Like, I also DJ too. So like what I do weddings and that kind of stuff I can't do from home. I have to be there to do it. Yeah. But the day job thing, if you're pushing paper or you're doing things that are digital like that, there's no reason why. I mean, it's more eco-friendly anyway to be like at home no emissions, all that kind of stuff. And I'm all for that. I've been trying to, get to work remote now for a couple years now, 3-4 years or whatever. I mean, I've been up here since 2009. But when I first moved up here, I made a deal with the label that I worked for. I worked at EMI at the time, and my boss is cool. It's like, no, that's fine. You're moving away, fine. Work a couple of days from home, a couple of days in the office, and I did that for a bunch of years, and it was like very, very less stressful. Felt better about it, more comfortable. I'm not the kind of person. I hate when I have that feeling of eyes behind my shoulder when I'm doing something. Like I'm getting my job done. You don't need to watch me. I'm an adult.
Right. I don't need to be micromanaged.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you worked for EMI and now you work for Sony. So
I work for Sony.
Do you feel comfortable discussing what you do?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I won't get too detailed about it. So yeah, I actually do royalty audits. So basically,
Ooh.
Yeah, so I've been doing it since 1999. I started at Arista Records, and I worked there under somebody that brought me in because I did a bunch of like finance work for my day job. I played music since I got out of high school, didn't go to school for music, wanted to, but went to work instead, kind of started playing in bands in New York City, did all that. Was signed on Century Media in the 90s and all that, and kept doing that sort of thing, but always kind of kept a day job. And I wanted to do something in the music industry because I felt like that I could kind of use my, finance background and that sort of thing, like a business-minded sort of background, and apply it to music industry.
Really,
and so I worked at Arista when Clive Davis was still there in the same building. It was amazing to see Pink and Christina Aguilera would come in, and you see them when they were newly signed. And, I was that guy that, bought vinyl at 7 and 8 years old with my allowance money and would look at the labels on the back and go, wow, wouldn't that be really cool to like work at a label someday or whatever in some capacity. And I remember interviewing at Arista and being in the waiting room, like in HR, with all the posters up of all these famous people, that were all signed at the, back in the day, and Clive Davis and everything, and just being such a fanboy of the whole thing, of the whole music industry in general. Just basically, my mouth was on the floor, and I was like, this would just be the best thing ever. And I got to work there, and I'm pretty much worked at every major label known to mankind. I always stayed there in part to that the benefits are really good. And so, you work for like a Sony corporation, the benefits are really good because there's thousands of employees, So I really like the indie label mentality better, honestly, but it's a day job when it comes down to it, so I have to do something for a living. So yeah, so I started doing that in 99. I went from Arista. I worked at Arista, Universal, EMI, Warner, and then now Sony.
That's cool.
So it's been kind of like all the people that stayed in it, like when the MP3 boom was coming, a lot of people got out. They were really scared, and the industry was in a bad way. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, people that stayed in the game 5 or 6 years, now streaming is huge, and the revenues went back up, and it kind of like went this way or that way. And now the major labels are making a lot of money again.
So when you do royalties, I assume all of that's new, like having to figure out royalties on streaming and all of that stuff also.
Yeah, they're constantly changing language and updating what they do. But it's so basically it's royalty audit on the label side. So basically it's like the artist hires a CPA, they come in, they look at the royalty statements, it's contractual, they make claims, and then you fight it out back and forth contractually. And then it's numbers too, but a lot of contractual interpretation.
So instinctively want to side with the artist? That
Again,
would be hard.
it's all contractual, so
Right.
you
I
know
know.
it has to it all really lays on that. But you know, all the labels are completely artist friendly. It's different than how it was 25 years ago or 30 years ago, where you know it was, you know, and I've been on both sides, you know, as an artist and being, I signed on Century Media and I saw how it worked there, you know, and they're up and coming label. They didn't have Lacuna Coil yet, you know, and then they became this kind of blew up, you know, they became kind of like a big indie label. Back when I was on it, you know, they had a handful of bands. It was like the mid 90s, and you know, they started going their direction. They have, you know, big distribution now and everything. But it is interesting to see both sides of it, and you know how all the components kind of work together. And my idea was basically, what I wanted to do was, you know, be able to read these contracts. So like if I got signed someday, I would know what I'm reading, you know.
Yeah,
But
it's funny because as a musician, instinctively I'm like, oh, the label.
I know, right?
Even though I absolutely love the label we're working with right now, like love, love, love. But it's funny how it's hammered into your head that like the evil major labels, and you know, there's such a stigma
I
attached.
know. I mean, they're the bank. That's it.
Right,
You
right.
know, so I mean, you have to just think of it, you know, from a business standpoint. You have to kind of look at it from that sort of mentality and say, look, you know, if I had a shitload of money, maybe I could do this on my own. And now, you know, with the internet and Instagram and TikTok and all these platforms, maybe you don't necessarily, and if you have a name, I mean, you know, you probably don't need the label anymore, you know, if
Right.
you're, you know, a super act or whatever. But, you know, a lot of the acts are still, you know, doing the advances, and, you know, it's changed a bit. You know, the advances are not the same as they were, and things are different. Things have changed, you know,
So,
but
do you think because of the way things are changed, where an artist can have more control of their stuff, that the major labels have been forced to be a little more artist friendly? Because
yeah,
they
yeah.
could say, like, well, I don't need you. I can go release my stuff on my own and bypass all of this.
Well, sure, that absolutely. But I also think, though, that from a major label standpoint, you have to look at it from what kind of artist you are, you know. And it's like, if you're like, say, a goth artist, or you're like, you know, an experimental artist of whatever genre you decide you like, and want to be involved in, whether it's avant-garde jazz or it's, you know, I don't know, black metal or whatever, you know, it's like, then, you know, you can do that on your own,
Sure.
and you can get out there, and you don't necessarily, you know, you have more of a say and you have control over everything. But, you know, if you are Dua Lipa, you know, and that's what you do, and you're doing pop music, and you want to have, you know, 250 million followers on Instagram or TikTok, then, you know, then you maybe you need the label, you know, you need the distribution, and you need to get out there, and you need the machine behind you. And that's really what it is. It's always been like that. It's just now, it's you know, it's you know, very R&B and dance oriented and things like that. And they're not as much rock. You know, I mean, there are some bands that are starting to get signed. I don't know. Big fan of Inhaler, and a lot of people know that I am. But Inhaler is Bono. Elijah Newson is Bono's son, and he has this new post-punk kind of influenced '80s thing. Vocals sound very similar to his dad's, but his vocals are very excellent, and they're pop, but they're rock, and they have guitars going on. And you don't see that in pop music right now as much as it used to be, where it was like, you know, the genres, there was a rock genre in the 60s and the 70s through the 80s and the 90s. And, you know, going from like, you know, whatever, hair metal and things that were on MTV, Guns N' Roses, or Nirvana, you know, these are guitar driven music, you know. And then you see that it fell off with, you know, all that stuff in the like the mid 90s, late 90s, things are starting to fall out. I mean, maybe there was like the Strokes and things like that that were happening in the early 2000s, the Killers and things, but like you don't really see that so much right now, where it's like I think a lot of that stuff is kind of now on indies and kind of gone more that direction and stuff like that. So it's interesting to see. I live in the past since I do royalty audit. So it's like I really, and what I do is the past artists. I really enjoy doing them more than the newer artists. So the newer artists, I don't really do those newer audits. I do only catalog artists. So I do Elvis Presley and things like that, which are like a lot of fun because I get to read those contracts and I know the catalog. I'm a huge Elvis fan since I've been a little kid. And so it's easy for me to be able to go, oh yeah, I know where that song is. I remember what release it's on or whatever, you know? So
yeah, that is cool. That is cool. We worked for a music and film distributor in Ohio back in, let's see, when did we do? 98, 99, 2000 era. And it was kind of fun because like you, it's like, you know, obviously we were musicians and stuff, but we also had to have jobs. So it was like, at least we were doing something that was music related.
Right.
And so it was kind of fun because we got to see all the new releases that would come in and all the old titles and stuff too. Like sometimes you would just find yourself down an aisle looking at records, you know?
Yep.
And it was kind of cool getting to do a lot of that stuff. And it's funny though now because it was like the whole Britney Spears era. So like I can remember all of the releases that were huge because we would just pull boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of these releases. And they would have these huge pallets stacked up with just their releases on them and stuff. But yeah, and then like you said, the MP3 thing happened. And not only did Lycia quit selling records, but like we lost our job there because there wasn't enough money to keep staff. So like they had to get rid of like 50% of the staff one day. And that's when Mike and I packed up and decided to move back to Arizona. But yeah, it was such a sad thing because we really loved working there because a lot of musicians worked there. So we had that camaraderie also because it was kind of like a known thing. Like, yeah, let's go work at the music. You got to have a job. Let's go work at the music place. But yeah, that was a good time. It was probably one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. A lot of really cool people. And,
that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
It's funny because they later got out of the music business and they got into selling like sex toys and porn.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, I'm like, that would have been interesting had we stayed on and then had to switch over to doing sex toys and porn.
Right.
I think the company's gone now, but anyways, that was
whatever sells, I guess, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much.
You know?
It was funny because the people that owned the company were super conservative. So I can't even in my brain wrap around that transition happened. But
you're like, who put that idea in their head all of a sudden? Like, okay, this is what we're gonna do now.
Yeah, it's funny.
That's crazy. Yeah. A lot of people that I've met in the music industry in the major label scene are musicians. They're you know, even though it's fine, you know, finance based like what I do, there are a lot of people that are, you know, they're musicians, they need a day job and they figure it out and they're like, okay, I'm going to work at the label and you know, and it's fun. I mean, like what I do right now is a little bit more outside the label because kind of like how Sony is set up, it's like the finance department's not necessarily at the label where back, you know, when I worked at the other labels, like when I worked at Arista, it was all on one roof. When I worked at Warner, it was all on one roof. So, you know, you'd have like, which was crazy. Like Zach Holtzman would have an office and like I'm a huge Doors fan, you know? So it's like, you'd see people like that around, you know, that were like old timers and like, you know, you have like these new kids that are like, you know, all into new music and they're like, you know, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, 21 or 24 or whatever. And they're all, yeah, I'm in the music industry or whatever, you know, and they'd be people walking by that they'd have no idea who they were. And it's like, no, that's actually a legend walking around the office right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's
Which is
really
cool. So yeah, as a music geek and a fan, and you know, growing up on MTV and
yeah.
AM and FM radio, just, you know, being able to look at the vinyl or look at the releases when they came out and be able to get them. And like, you know, I was able to get a lot of stuff for, you know, under cost, and really help build up my vinyl collection for Rhino and other things or whatever. So it's definitely fun. I mean, I got a lot of, you know, Sisters of Mercy re-releases, and, you know, they have, you know, there's 4AD. I was able to get some things there, and, you know, so it's definitely cool, you know, to be able to get, you know, some Cocteau Twins and things. Yeah. So there's some things there too. But yeah, it's a living, you know, it's something that I have to do during the day, and at least it's music oriented, which
yeah, I mean, I would much rather be doing that than what I'm doing, for sure.
Because yeah, I mean, it's good. It's definitely, you know, and then like I also, you know, I DJ weddings. I DJ'd in the city for a long time, like clubs and stuff like that. And then, you know, I had to figure out, okay, as an aging DJ, what can I actually do to be able to make some money? And I tried actually doing wedding DJing in my early 20s, mid 20s, and I was just like, nah, I don't think this is for me. You know, it's like wedding band, I feel like, you know, like that sort of thing. And you know, and even recently, like in the probably last maybe 5 or 10 years, I've had offers to play drums. That's like my main instrument, playing drums. Like in wedding bands, I have friends that are like successful at doing it, and they do, you know, their 30 gigs a season and stuff like that. But I actually make more money DJing on my own. So I'm like, well, you know, I could be playing this Dua Lipa song on drums and get paid a third of what I get paid if I just push the button, click, you know. But it's a lot, you know. But wedding DJing is an interesting thing. It's very high stress. It's high stress.
Interesting things.
It's high stress, and it's very linear. It's like if you have to you have to be like, okay, here's the timeline, and I'm following the timeline in with, you know, wedding coordinators and making sure everything's good and making sure that the crowd's happy and stuff. And it just ends up being, and it's music oriented too, but it's not like, oh, like, hey, let me turn you on to this new thing. You know, it's not like that.
Right. That's cool though. I mean, I'm sure you've got some probably interesting stories about weird shit that's gone on at some weddings. I can imagine.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been doing it up here in the Woodstock area since 2013. So it's been some time.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I do like about anywhere between like 20 and 25 or so a year. And it's good. It's good. But, you know, it's like, I'm doing a 5 days a week. And then sometimes now that, you know, 2020, everything got canceled. And then now everything moved to 2021. So like everything up until now, up until probably almost August time, has been double booked. So I'm like working 5 days and then working Saturday, Sunday. And it's kind of crazy. It's great. But now things are starting to cancel due to the variant. So like all of a sudden things are starting to move a little bit the other direction. So it is interesting. Yeah, I do have some crazy stories about people getting too drunk and wanting to, you know, get physical and angry and sometimes,
some Karens.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. I mean, look, it's like I don't, you know, I'm there to do a service, which is like I'm there to entertain and make sure that you got, you know, the wedding party's happy, the bride and groom are happy. You know, it's what you want. I'm not there to entertain myself. I'm there to make sure that you're having a good time and all that. But yeah, but there are people that, you know, they get too drunk and then they want to DJ, you know. It's like, well, no, I'm doing this. And so it's, you know, I have to smile a lot, you know, put on a happy face.
You get people requesting really, really weird stuff. And I say this because that music distributor that I worked at, they had this big Christmas party one time, and they hired a DJ. And me and my friends are so stupid. So we were like requesting all this weird stuff, but we requested Convoy. You remember that song
Of
Convoy?
course. Yeah.
And we're just dying laughing because the guy played it for us and stuff. And like, to me, I'm that person that wants to request the weirdest shit that I can think of just to
Right.
get weird people out or whatever.
Yeah. It
Do you,
has to, I basically, I mean, I benchmark it. I mean, of course, I always say like, hey, is it okay if people ask me for requests? And usually they're like, you know, couples are like, yeah, totally, that's totally fine. But I also tell them too, if your theme of your dance party is going to be Beyonce and Pitbull and things that are dance oriented, you know, because it's a dance party, and someone asks me for, you know, White Zombie. Now, I love White Zombie, but I'm not going to play White Zombie for you because it just does not work. Everyone's going to, it's like the needle, like, shit.
yeah,
And people like, what? How? And but I've done there was one wedding that I did a few seasons ago, was the people were super cool, a lot of punk rockers, a lot of goths, and I was, you know, the dance floor was like the Smiths and the Cure, and I like that, you know, like if I can do that. And then like the closing, you know, the closing song they had was Monstrous Clonk from Ghost. So I was like, that's interesting, you know, like that's obviously more up my alley and more fun and stuff. But I can just as easily do a 70s disco wedding, all 5 hours of disco. I have no problem doing that. But for me, more annoying, you know, wedding after wedding is the same old dance music that's played. And I'm like, okay, here we go again. I know that, you know, Timber goes into, you know, I Love It, you know, and these songs that are like these contemporary dance songs that people, they love it. And the crowd's like dancing, they're up and they're doing it. You know, that's the, yeah, you know, it's not my position to call out whether or not it's cool or not. I'm not there to like, you know what I mean? You know, you want to hear like the, you know, the safety dance over and over and over again 5 times in a row, no problem. You know, I'm getting the same, you know, it's like, I'm not there to judge, you know, I'm like Pandora, basically. I'm like, okay, you know, you like this, you like that, and then I'll play a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and make sure the crowd pleasers are there and stuff, you know. And then sometimes people are like, you know, asking me for, they're like, oh no, we don't want the chicken dance, and then like they get drunk off their ass and they're like, can you play the chicken dance? So it's interesting for sure. But yeah, it's something else that I do for money, you know.
Yeah, no, I love it. So you mentioned that you were in New York City, you know, in the 90s and whatever. So I'm assuming that you probably hung out in the clubs that we played in. Now, I'm not saying you were at my show, but I'm sure you were like downtown. What was that place called? Downtime, where the back was.
Yep. Yeah.
And Limelight.
Downtown. Downtown. Yep.
Downtown. Yeah. We played there. I want to say twice, but it might have been 3 times.
But you guys were on tour with Typo too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and you did like Limelight or something, right?
We played Limelight on the 4th of July. I think it was 1995. Mm-hmm. And we headlined that one. But we played Roseland Ballroom with Typo.
That's awesome. I saw Typo. I did not see you guys, and I wish I did, but I saw Typo with Danzig and Godflesh. And Godflesh, I know you love Godflesh. Yeah, Godflesh opened, and it was on Selfless. They had Brain playing drums. It's like one time they had like the live drummer. But I went to go see Godflesh because I love Godflesh, and the first time I saw Godflesh was with my wife and my very, very good friend, Tammy Shapiro, who was with last night. I've known forever. We went to go see Godflesh on Pure, and Monster Magnet opened right around Super Judge period. Now I'm a huge Monster Magnet fan. I saw Monster Magnet, like they're from the New Jersey area. So I saw them open for Mudhoney. in a New York City club, probably 89 or 90. And a friend of mine was really into Monster Magnet. I was like, I had no idea who they were.
Sure.
And she's all on the Sub Pop stuff and all the, you know, the new grunge stuff. She like knew Alice in Chains and those bands. And so she, you know, she's like, oh, you know, these guys are great. And I'm like, I watched them and I was like, wow, I don't know. And then I went out and I bought Spine of God and I just fell in love with that record. And then I went to go see them. They're probably like the biggest band, like the most I've ever seen any 90s band in the 90s was them. I like saw them probably like 25 something times. But anyway, they opened for Godflesh and we were tripping on mushrooms. And it was like, I was tripping so hard when Godflesh were on. And I'm a huge fan of Pure is amazing, and Street Cleaner too. I love those records. And the newer record that came out recently is really good too. But it was really amazing to see them.
I can't imagine.
They were great. They were great. Yeah. But I went to go see Godflesh with Typo and Danzig because I wanted to go see Godflesh. Like I saw Danzig for when he did Sam Hain in '86. And then I saw when Danzig did the first record, they played the Ritz a couple times. The first time I went, the second time I went. So I was like, yeah, you know, I was kind of like, I love the first Danzig album, but I'm not really too much of a fan of Lucifuge and the other records. But, you know, Godflesh opened for Typo and Danzig. And I'm like, I have to go. I want to check all of them out anyway, you know, and Typo was great, you know, and I actually met Pete a couple times, but my friend, who I was in this band Visaria with, who was on Century Media, he is now in Carnivore AD, and he's like doing the Pete Steele thing. Yeah, and he knew because like Pete's like from, you know, the hardcore scene in New York City and Brooklyn. And so my friend who I was in this band with, who's now in, you know, Carnivore AD, knew Pete really well. And so one time at the Limelight, Pete was just hanging out and we were all there. So I got to meet him. He was super cool and chill, super nice guy, no attitude.
Not at all.
No attitude at all. No, like, oh, I'm Pete Steele. It wasn't like that at all. It's like, hey man, you know, it's just a really nice.
Yeah, he's
nice.
Smart.
I know that he was a huge fan of you guys.
Yeah, it's so weird because, I mean, I don't like that fan word because it makes me uncomfortable, but he was he was very, very good to us. Very good. And just such a sweet guy. And, you know, of course it's hard to even imagine that he's not here. Like,
I know.
How does someone like that just go away, you know? It's very strange. So I saw Typo sort of by accident also. It must have been 1990 or 91. In Cleveland, we went to see The Exploited. And so it was Exploited, Biohazard, and Typo Negative. I didn't know anything about Biohazard and I had never heard of Typo Negative. But it stuck in my head because Typo played first, and when they came out, it was just like, holy cow. Like, first I'm only like 5'2", so anybody taller than like 5'6" is like a giant to me. But they were so huge, and they all have this like long black hair and stuff. And at the time I was like, I listened to like some punk stuff, like I liked Exploited and junk like that, but I mostly listened to like The Cure and Susie and the Banshees and Bauhaus and that kind of stuff. Right. So I didn't really know anything about that world for the most part. And I just remember being like, wow, they're all really, really tall with really, really long hair. And it stuck in my mind. And then, like, you know, of course, fast forward a few years, and Peter got in touch with Mike to see if we wanted to go do that tour and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, that's that band that I saw play in Cleveland like a million years ago. And I remember telling Josh that I saw them on that tour, and his response was, I'm sorry. But yeah, I don't know. They're such sweet people. Like they're just such good, actually good people. And like you said, like there's no ego at all. And
None.
you know this from being in a band and being around musicians and stuff. So many people are their own biggest fan, and it's so off-putting because it's gross to me. And
Yeah.
so when you meet someone who's had like real, true, actual success, and they're so like self-deprecating and there's no ego to it at all, it's just like some people need to learn a lesson like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I think a lot of that too is that it's almost like new money, like people that like old money. It's like there a lot of times people like, oh yeah, we've had it forever, and then new money, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, it's all about the Benjamins and that
like
whole
it
thing.
goes to their head or something. I don't know. Yeah, I
The
don't know. I think too sometimes when someone comes from sort of a working class background, you have a bit of a different mentality towards everything a lot
Definitely.
of times. So, yeah, it just always impressed me about them because they could have had egos if they wanted to have egos.
For
They
sure.
had plenty of success and whatever, but it just I always tell this story because it's just so Peter that the first time we met them, we showed up to New London, Connecticut, and we walked backstage, and he's sitting there with like their table of food or whatever, and he's like, can I make you a sandwich? And I'm like, that's so Peter, because he was more concerned with making us a sandwich, and of course we're like, no, no, no. But just that was how he was and how he treated us. And it's just terribly sad to me that he's not still here. And
Yeah.
I'm bummed out because him and Mike, had talked for years about doing a project together, and they had actually talked about it not too long before he passed away. So it bums me out so freaking bad that never happened, because I can't
Yeah.
even imagine how cool it
It
could
would
have
be interesting to see what that would have,
been.
what
Right.
would have came from it.
Yeah. I'm so
Definitely.
bummed it never happened.
Yeah. I, I've, I'm sure like like about like the whole thing, the fandom and, you know, meeting, certain people that are like of certain status or whatever. I've also met a bunch of people too, just along the way by hanging out in the New York City scene and seeing people come through on their way up or whatever it may be. And I have a good story, I think. I got to hang out one time with Lemmy from Motorhead, and he was like the super most nice guy that I've ever met ever. He was hosting this thing at the Ritz, and it was around 88 or something like that. And he just had a heart attack actually, and he was a little bit cleaner, not doing speed. He was still drinking alcohol, of course, still the rock star. Um, but he was co-hosting this thing with Joey Ramone at the Ritz, and he actually walked into the bar where I was hanging out with my friend, his girlfriend, and my girlfriend at the time was coming to meet us. And he walked in, and I'm like, oh my God, it's Lemmy. And he's just standing right next to us at the bar. And he starts talking to us. And we're just talking because he's by himself. And it's like a Thursday night before the Friday that he's hosting this thing at the Ritz. And he was just like talking to us for like an hour and a half, like just about like Motorhead, anything you could think of, just like not affected, no attitude.
Yeah.
We had at the time a button, like I had a button on my jacket, like the band
Yeah.
button that me and my friend were in, and he took it off my jacket and he pinned it on his jacket.
Oh my
And
gosh.
he's like, look, he's like, we're all the same. He's like, we're all musicians. And it was like, I mean, I wish I was like knew about Hawkwind, which I'm a huge Hawkwind fan now,
Yeah.
but like, and I didn't start getting into them until like probably like 90 or 91. But like when I met him, of course I like know Motorhead. So my girlfriend at the time's coming to meet us. She walks through the door and she's wearing a Motorhead shirt. And and he was just like, hey, or whatever. I was like, hey,
Oh my
come
gosh.
on over. Let's hang out with Lemmy. And she's like, what? You know, and then he comped us tickets to the next night, which was like the night that he hosted with Joey Ramone at the Ritz. So we got in VIP and everything. But it was such a good feeling to meet. I mean, and I've met a bunch of people that like I idolize. I mean, I know you the fandom thing or whatever, but there are definitely people that have idolized
Oh, of course.
that like had been not very nice, you know, or very short, you know, like, look, it's like, you know, obviously if I'm coming up to you and I mean, I'm very introverted too, believe it or not. I can talk and I get talking and I'm good, but like, I'm very, very like, you know, I see somebody like I have a famous story. I went to go see a show at it's like the Paramount Theater, which basically was the Old Fell Forum under Madison Square Garden. And I went to go see with a friend, Lenny Kravitz on Mama Said, opening for the Cults. It was the Cults ceremony. And we were there. My friend actually, who's now in Alice Cooper band, we used to play with him and he had better tickets than we had. So I was like with a friend, we were like in 10th row or 12th row. He had 3rd row. Like, okay, he's like, I'm done watching Lenny Kravitz. He's like his last song or second to last song. He's like, I'm out of here. I'm going to go somewhere else or whatever. So he gives us the tickets and we walk up to 3rd row and we're standing right there watching Lenny Kravitz. And I love Lenny Kravitz. And so anyway, we're all watching him and everything. And like the lights go up and I'm with my friend and she says to me, she goes, Madonna's sitting right behind you. And I'm like, what? And so I was like, okay, I have to say something to Madonna. So like, I turn around and I just look at her and she looks right at me. And I was like, I just had to say, I think you rule. I love you. You're great. You know, I grew up with the first album, huge fan or whatever. And she thought I told her she sucked. And she's like, what did you say to me? And I said to her, no, I said, I think you rule. And she looked down, blushed, and she said, thank you. And it was such a weird, random thing. And it's like a huge star to have met. And like, I don't normally would say, I mean, I've seen so many people out and I was like, Prince, people like that. Like, I would never go up to them, ever.
Right.
I can't, you know what I mean? Like, there's no way. I would never even say like, hey, you know, I love you or whatever. No, there's no way I'm going to do that. But like, if I'm face to face and, well, maybe I'm going to say something, but you know, I don't know.
How funny.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So how about this? How did you get into goth music? Like, how did that, what was the first thing that you listened to? Like, what grabbed you? Like, I have my story and I can tell it, but I want to hear your story.
Sure. So, I mean, it's really, really late to the game probably, but when Love Song by The Cure came out, that was the first song that really, it changed my perspective on like everything. Prior to that, I liked music, but I wasn't like, I didn't really care about it, you know? I mean, I liked Queen a lot and I used to listen to Queen a lot, but I wasn't like obsessed with it. And, you know, at the time, like my cousin had sent me a duped copy of like a Circle Jerks tape and I liked that, but I didn't really like obsess about anything. But when Love Song by The Cure came out, that was just it. So I got obsessed with The Cure. And then like, we didn't have cable at my house or anything. So I didn't have access to MTV or anything like that, but my friend did. So every time I was at her house, we would watch MTV and specifically 120 Minutes. So getting into The Cure and then watching 120 Minutes and getting exposed to other things. And then, you know, I grew up in rural Ohio, so access to stuff was non-existent. But we lived close to Kent, Ohio, which was where Kent State University is. And there's always been a healthy music scene in Kent. And so as we got older and we could like drive into Kent and stuff, and then there was a couple little punk clubs there and stuff like that. And then we met people, and then that's how I got exposed to more stuff. So at first I was kind of just into like sort of mainstream stuff, like The Cure, Susie and the Banshees, stuff like that that we would see on MTV
Right.
and they were kind of easy to find in a record store. And then when I started meeting people in Kent who were like from Cleveland and like Akron and other places who had access to more stuff like uh you know, legendary Pink Dots and Death in June and Swans and all of this kind of stuff. It's like evolved to that. And I got sort of into the more obscure, more difficult to find stuff unless you know someone that knows someone that knows someone, you know what I mean?
Right.
So
Right.
that's kind of how that started for me.
That's
But I was
cool.
kind of a late bloomer to me. Like, again, I mean, I was what, 17, something like that.
Mhm.
So, you know, everyone I know is like, oh, I've loved music my whole life. And I got into it when I was like 10 or something. And I'm like,
All
man,
right.
I'm 17 and, you
Right.
know, I'm older. But that's my story.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I mean, again, I don't know. My dad was a musician. He had Bernard Purdie playing on his recording, so he ended up Bernard Purdie, if you know who he is. Anyway, he was a drummer, and he ended up being Aretha Franklin's musical director.
Yeah.
So I had music pretty much in the house since I've been like in the crib, and
Yeah.
and just like started listening to. At the time, we didn't have FM radio in the 70s because my parents they weren't like FM fans. They were like, my mom was like into Broadway stuff. She worked actually in the Shubert theaters on Broadway in the 50s and 60s, had great stories about meeting Paul Newman and all these different,
Oh my God.
amazing people that like, would be on Broadway before they would like maybe be in movies and stuff like that. And she had a lot of really great stories of seeing people before they were famous and stuff. So so there was, there was that being played in the house, a lot of jazz and stuff like that played in the house. But, I started listening to AM radio because AM radio was in the car. And so AM radio in New York City played everything from, you know, like classic rock, like Boston and things that were just in the top 40. So like you'd get Boston and the Eagles, you'd get Donna Summer and Kiss. So you'd get this just weird hodgepodge of whatever was in the top 40. So,
Yeah.
and then living by New York City too, because my mom's was originally from New York City. So I was right next to the Bronx because my grandparents lived in basically Spanish Harlem, but it's Washington Heights. And so I heard a lot of disco and when hip hop started, with Grandmaster Flash and stuff like that, I was already getting it. So when we got MTV, I was 1981. We got MTV. We were like one of the first towns. Like cable was all like weird back then. So like one town would have a different cable. So one town had Time Warner cable. One town had like Cablevision. So like one system would carry MTV, one wouldn't. So actually the town that I lived in carried MTV since day one. So like I pretty much watched it from day one. So, as a kid and growing up, the town that I lived in, basically, they're all into FM radio. So they're all into like Led Zeppelin, the Grateful Dead, all this stuff. And I'm listening to, I'm watching MTV and getting Duran Duran and The Cure and Depeche Mode.
Right.
But then also Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and things like that. So like, and Motley Crue and things. So like, to me, it was all like pop music anyway. I didn't really have any sort of like, oh, it's this or it's that, or I don't really like this. It's just, to me, it was like, oh, that's cool. Like, check that out. Oh, that's cool. So I was just like basically sponging all that stuff in. And then a friend of mine in 10th grade, so for 10th grade for me was 1983 or something like that, or 82. His brother was a big post-punk fan. So he had and also hardcore and punk. So he had things like Crass, he had things like Susie and the Banshees and Bauhaus and Joy Division and things like that. So he introduced me to that stuff, like Susie, he had like Juju and we were listening to Juju Nocturne and things like that. And then, also I'm getting from, you know, The Cure and all that stuff from MTV. So I think that's probably my first hearing of anything like that was from him in 10th grade. And then like MTV started playing Spellbound, and I started really, that was probably it grabbed me. But I
Yeah.
think that really what sucked me into the whole thing was I went to go see The Hunger in the theater and the whole Bauhaus intro. And I knew my friends were into Bauhaus, and like, you know, I knew The Sky's Gone Out and some of Mask and stuff like that, but I didn't know Bela Lugosi's dead for whatever reason. And then when I saw them do that opening thing with Bowie, and then realized that actually that Bowie is an influence on Bauhaus and like how that whole circle kind of works or whatever. And I've loved Bowie since the late 70s, and always was a big fan. Didn't understand a lot of his music until I got a little bit older. It was a little too sophisticated for me at the time.
Yeah.
But always loved Bowie. So yeah, so I think The Hunger probably really kind of really reeled me into liking all that stuff. And like remember being young and getting the Village Voice and 83 and 84 and not being able to go to those clubs because I was too young. I didn't have an older brother to take me. I didn't have older friends. I had friends that were older that were going, and I wasn't allowed to go. My parents were like, that's not happening, you know, but like everything that was happening there from, you know, Dead or Alive were playing in the beginning, and things like even like the Romantics and I don't know, Bow Wow Wow, and just so much great MTV things and these up and coming things that were happening at the time, Duran Duran. And I would have loved to see, I did get to see Duran Duran, but I didn't get to see them till 84. But
I
there was
can't
so much.
imagine like the access that you had to stuff because, you know, like I said, I grew up in rural Ohio. So it was like, I mean, my parents listened to country, like Southern gospel and bluegrass music and like, you know, top 40 country music and stuff. So I didn't really know anything that was going on. Like I tell Mike all the time, you know, there's Led Zeppelin songs that'll come on the radio that I've never heard before because I just didn't have access to any of that stuff in my house. And so
Yeah,
I can't imagine like being in New York City and the access that you guys all have to just everything. It's
totally.
was
Totally. I mean, like the, yeah, I mean, even the FM radio stations, like, again, I mean, I started listening to FM radio when I started getting into junior high, which is like, I was in junior high, 79, 80, 81. And, you know, all friends that I had didn't know what MTV was. And I was starting to watch it, and I was addicted to it. I mean, it's like it was on all the time. It was like, you know, it changed everything. And watching it was like sort of the same sort of thing like people when they listen to FM radio in the 70s where they're like, I'm waiting for my song to come on. Or even if you like AM, you know, pop radio or whatever, you're like, you waited. And it was the same thing with MTV. Like, when are they going to play that Duran Duran video or whatever you were into, you know, and it's just changed everything. And yeah, and having access to FM radio, like friends in junior high school, I mean, they were turned me all on. I didn't know, I was a Kiss fan. So like I grew up on Kiss, and you know, I had friends that were in grade school that were Kiss fans. Paul Lynde Halloween Special in 76, I saw it, and it changed everything for me. My first concert was Kiss at Madison Square Garden, but 79 was the Dynasty period. So that's, I Was Made for Loving You and all that stuff. And while, you know, the older kids were like, oh, Kiss. They're like, what do you like that stuff for? They're like, that was so 1976 or 77 and now 79. And well, you know, I'm 10 years to 11 years old and being a Kiss kid, like loving Kiss and Star Wars and, you know, things of the 70s that I grew up on, like 70s TV, like Charlie's Angels and stupid stuff like that. You know, I mean, there's all the stuff, the culture that happened then. But being able to have the access to classic rock and stuff like that, yeah. I mean, like, I didn't know who Led Zeppelin were, and friends that lived across the street from me would come, and I'd be like playing Kiss Alive 2. I'm like, yeah, check out this guitar solo, you know, from Ace Frehley or whatever. And they would be like, no, Jimmy Page actually did that, you know, 10 years before. Listen to what he's doing in in Heartbreaker or something, you know, and they play it back and forth. Oh, I'm getting to see where bands that I loved are coming from, you know, and then you go backwards and you go to the Beatles, and then, you know, and then Elvis. I was a huge Elvis fan anyway. So like in the 70s, like I remember seeing live via satellite on TV, and that was 73, and I was like 5, you know, and I was just like the biggest fan and just loved this 50s period. And then got, you know, the rockabilly period, the 50s period, you know, the comeback special where he's all in leather, the whole 70s thing. He's just like such a quintessential rock star guy, you know, like it was so, you know, to see, I mean, I was supposed to go see him, but then he passed away, and sad, the whole thing that happened with him. But just, it was, you know, he was almost like in a way, I don't know, we got Jim Morrison, precursor to goth, these dark-haired, godly looking guys or whatever.
You know, it's funny that you said that about, you know, kind of learning things in retrospect. So again, back to the whole being in Ohio, it's like, whatever you're like, you had to find the influence from someplace. So if your friends didn't listen to certain music, you didn't know about it, because the only real way to get any information at that point was through people that you knew. And I was telling Mike today, because he's a massive Killing Joke fan, huge influence on him. He's loved him from day one, whatever. So the past couple of days, we've been watching a bunch of Killing Joke, like we rewatched the Killing Joke documentary, and we, you know, this, that, and the other. So today while I was working, I was listening to Killing Joke all day, and like Killing Joke, for whatever reason, wasn't in my friends circle. So I never really listened to them. So like Mike plays Killing Joke often, and when I hear it, I'm like, oh, it's really good, whatever. But I never was obsessed with it as a young person. So I'm kind of learning it now. And I said to him, like, how am I today years old and am just now getting obsessed with Killing Joke? Like, it's so ridiculous. And I said to him, I'm like, don't you ever hear music? Like, you're hearing it kind of new, even though it's super old. And wish that you could just time travel, because I want to be into this stuff when it was coming out, not way after the fact, you know, like I want to be there in the first round, you know. But it's just such a strange thing, because, you know, like, I guess being a musician or whatever, people assume that you know a lot about music. And I mean, I know about what I know about, but I don't, it's the spectrum is like small, and music is like this, you know?
It is.
So it's funny how you can, Killing Joke's been around forever, and just getting obsessed with it now. It's just weird to me, you know?
I know. But the thing is that what's great, the good news is that like you're saying, back in the day, I mean, the only way you would really know about stuff would be either like the radio or MTV if you had it, you know, or friends that were into stuff. Now it's like, go to YouTube, you can go and find everything, and you can re-experience everything. So like, you know, like right now, there's a huge goth resurgence going on. And these 19 and 20-year-old kids that are all like talking about like Bauhaus and the traditional gothers. That are all into this, and they're like, oh, you know, you grew up in the 80s and you saw, you know, X, Y, and Z. And it's like, yeah, okay, true. But like for my generation, like I wish I would have saw what was at the Fillmore East. You know what I mean? Like 1967, like Led Zeppelin opening for Vanilla Fudge, Jimi Hendrix. I wanted to see that. I wanted to see CBGBs. I want to see Blondie at CBGBs, like in '76, you know, the Ramones. That's what I want to see. And yeah, and while I did see bands in the 80s, but you know, it's like, yeah, I saw the Ramones in the 80s. Yeah, okay. But I didn't see them in 1976. So it's you know, I think we all have that sort of thing where it's like, you know, there's things that you start, and music is so endless. It's really like endless digging. And like, I mean, like there's so many different genres of music that you could just dig forever. And yeah, maybe I don't know if you could do it in a lifetime. If you're like really like a fan, I know you don't like the word, but like if you are a fan of something and you really want to dig, especially now where the internet is there, you do research, there's just so much stuff that's out there and more stuff. And I mean, I tell people that are like, oh, I didn't experience the goth scene in the 80s. I'm like, yeah, but you know what though? You could live it if you want. You want to think this is the 80s, go ahead, live it and go onto YouTube and watch the concerts that are available to you.
And that's just it too, is that, you know, we didn't have access to this stuff. It, like in 1985, you couldn't watch a video that some guy in England took at a Sex Pistols show. There was no way to watch that unless you were that guy and his immediate friends. But now, because people have uploaded all of this stuff to the internet, you know, 1985 Sex Pistols weren't playing, but you know what I mean. But
no, totally.
But yeah, it's
totally.
And it's like ending, like it's intimidating in a way, because there's just so much that, like, there's so much good new music too, that I get so intimidated by it because you can't know all of it. You know what I mean? I mean, I can't. I know. It's so intimidating I do the same thing with comic books, where like I want to read comic books, but where do you start? Because there's so much that I end up backing away and just being like, okay, well, I'm not going to even get started because I don't know where to start. But it's kind of the same thing for me with music, where there's just so much. And so you kind of just stick to what you already know a lot of times. So it's I don't know. There's just so much of everything all the time, from movies to books to music, everything. There's so much information that sometimes it's a bit daunting and like overwhelming. And before we move on, I want to clarify the fan thing. I'm a fan of a lot of things, but I don't like anyone referring that to me.
Right, I get
like, that creeps me out. Like when someone says I'm your fan, like, no, you're just someone who like listens to our music or whatever. Because it almost it puts you on some weird hierarchy thing or something. I don't know, but I'm a fan of a lot.
I mean, I mean, for me, like what I think about like the word fan is like really like it's fanatic. Like you're actually just such a fanatic of that person's art. That's really what you are, and just like you respect it so much, and that's something that really means something to you, you know. And I know it's like you all of a sudden are being put on this certain level, and you're like, maybe you don't want to be put there or whatever it may be. It like might feel uncomfortable or
it's awkward because to me, I'm just the same like weird chubby girl from the Midwest that doesn't know anything about anything. So for anybody to think I'm somehow cool it doesn't compute in my brain. You know what I mean? So it just makes me feel uncomfortable. That's all. And like to think of like you said Peter Steele was a fan, and I'm just like, no, but he's Peter Steele. Like, no. He just liked our music.
Right.
It just makes
sense. Yeah, no, point taken. Totally. Yeah, there's so much stuff that's out there. You know, at the times, like again, you know, like I'm a huge horror fan, and you know, horror for me growing up was, you know, what was in the 70s and the 80s.
Ooh, you froze. No, you're frozen. You froze up. This is the time in the set when we in the set in the show where we take a break while he reconnects to the internet. I don't know what's happening. Do 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 do. Are you there? Oh, I hope he's gonna try to come back in. I'm gonna wait a couple minutes and see if he tries to come back in. Did you hear my phone? I have turkeys. All right, my friends. I don't know what happened. I guess he lost internet service. So I guess that's it. We were going to talk about horror movies. Hopefully, maybe we'll come back another time and chat again. I was having fun discussing stuff and things. Um, I'm going to be doing more of these. I think I'm just not going to be doing them probably every single Friday. Just updating you all two of you that probably watch this. I don't know. Let's see. Is he coming back? All right, I'm going to go ahead and go because he's having internet issues. So I will get this uploaded tonight and I'll probably set up something with him to chat again some other time. And I will talk to y'all later. Bye.